What's going on, everybody? Hopefully you all had a good weekend. Today we're going to talk about wide receiver targets for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, with them needing to add a wide out late in the calendar after the George Pickens trade. If you guys are curious on my thoughts on that, not going to touch on that on this video. I did a stream last week that was like an hour long, so y'all can check that out. As for this video, I spent the last several days kind of perusing other teams' depth charts, watching some film, trying to find some realistic options that they could potentially pursue. Most of the names I've seen like thrown around on social media are really just like pipe dreams. So as much as I'd love to have like a guy like Garrett Wilson, he's not getting traded, guys. So it's always really difficult to predict who is available, who's not. But I'm trying to look at it through the lens of like moves that could potentially make sense for both sides to a degree, not just the Steelers, but also the team, trading away these players. The other part of this equation that makes it kind of difficult is because of the calendar and just where we are in the offseason. The free agent market just really isn't attractive at all, especially to me. But just my opinion. But guys like Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper, just very clearly on the downturn of their respective careers. And for a team in transition, kind of like the Steelers, I'm just way more interested in trying to acquire somebody that can not only help them this season, but maybe in future seasons as well. So they definitely got the draft capital to make a move like this. So I've got 6 players on this list that I want to talk about today. Kind of going to go over their background, strengths, weaknesses, why they could be available, things like that. The way that I've got this thing broken down is like I've got one Hail Mary long shot swing for the fences, and 4 useful upgrades with various different skill sets. And then I've got one cheap dart throw that I'm kind of sort of intrigued by. That was kind of a late add to this video last night. So just before we get started, if you guys would, make sure that you like, subscribe, drop me a comment. Just free, easy way to support the channel. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in even more content from me, consider becoming a channel member where you can get early access to vids just like this and some exclusive stuff as well. So without further ado, the first name on this list is Detroit Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams. So it's been a really wild ride for JMO and his pre-draft believers like myself. Detroit traded up in the first round to get him, even though he was still recovering from a torn ACL. Second season in the league, he's got the gambling suspension. But last year, 2024, took a significant step forward. He balled out, man. He led the entire NFL, yards per reception, 17.3 among wideouts with at least 75 targets, cracked 1,000 yards despite missing 3 games. So what I like about JMO, rare explosive play capabilities. His burst off the ball just puts like the fear of God in defenders. He's a threat on double moves because of that. He tracks the ball really well over his shoulder. He's a premium deep threat, and I think everybody kind of knows that because of his speed, but I also think he's just way more than that. Detroit was doing a lot of stuff just to get the ball in his hands, some screens, design touches on drag routes, crossers, things like that. He could just really churn out yardage with his acceleration, the stride length. He doesn't make a lot of guys miss, but like he has the explosiveness to really erase tackling angles. He's honestly really underrated from a toughness perspective, and I think that this is a really good sign for me as I was watching him last season, just the growth that he's shown in terms of making himself into a more well-rounded wide receiver. He's a guy that's going to go over the middle of the field. Like he doesn't show alligator arms, like he's willing to take contact, even though he is a little bit on the skinnier side. He's just a really, more well-rounded player than I think he was, his final year in college. He can haul in breakers, take some hits. He's a surprisingly feisty blocker, which I think, really speaks to him really buying into the culture that the Lions have kind of brought in under Dan Campbell. Kind of concerns me, in light of the recent like character stuff with the Steelers wide receivers. Are they willing to take on a risk like this, even though he's supremely talented? Totally understand that skepticism on that regard. There's definitely some details in his game that are lacking too. It's worth noting that this is still a player that's really early in his trajectory. He's really only played one full season in the league, and then he was a 1-year starter in college before coming out as an underclassman. So there's just not a lot of game reps on film. The Lions won 15 games last year. They're definitely in a Super Bowl window. They've kind of debunked the idea that they're interested in trading him, but they've also been very non-committal publicly about paying him. So he's got 2 cheap years left on his deal. They did pick up his 5th-year option. While I could see him being available for the right price, is they may be looking to sell high after he was coming off, over 1,000-yard season. They just oddly, in one of the weird moves of draft weekend, they spent 3 first-round picks on Isaac Tesla, which I thought was kind of strange. And then also when you just look at the cap and the way that the Lions are positioned financially, they have the second most money committed to the 2026 cap with only 37 players signed. They're over the cap next year with only 37 guys on the roster. So it's still a long shot, in my opinion, just because from Detroit's perspective, I would be trying to like go all in, try to make a playoff push with JMO. But if the right offer came across, they could be, willing to listen to those things. Now, what would it take? It's definitely going to take a premium draft asset. I don't think that he's necessarily a guy that I would be interested in trading a first round pick for. Definitely not. But a day 2 pick, maybe with some type of conditions or some type of excess draft capital involved, I would definitely be interested in that. It's definitely a swing for the fences type. There's some risk involved, but I do think that JMO is a lot better of a receiver than we've even had the chance to see in the NFL. The idea of having Metcalf and Williams kind of paired together with makes for a pretty intriguing situation for a rookie quarterback to walk into, and something I would at least be willing to explore, make a call about. So next player we'll talk about is one of the more commonly discussed names, is Romeo Doubs from the Green Bay Packers. The two teams that really have drafted this position better than anybody in my lifetime, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Green Bay Packers, especially considering neither of those teams have made a frequent habit of selecting these types of players in the first round. It definitely helps having Hall of Fame quarterbacks for, a long time in Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger. But I do think that Doubs is a guy that was forced into action early. He's gotten incrementally better year over year since then. He finished 2023 on a high note, strong playoff debut, 234 yards and a touchdown in 2 games. The Steelers could definitely use a guy that shows up in big games like that. What I like about Doubs, he's got really good size. He's 6'2", over 200 pounds, got massive hands, over 10-inch hands. He's a real weapon in the red zone. He's got 16 touchdowns through his first 3 seasons of his career. Where he really excels, man, is just with the ball in the air. Like, he's a guy who knows how to box guys out. He shows good body control. He can pluck the ball away from his frame. The numbers really back this up too. He's a guy that's hauled in almost 53% of his contested catch targets in the league. That's really his strength that's translated quite easily from his college days. He draws a lot of penalties, which I like. Doesn't show up in the box score necessarily, but he does move the chains. When going through his film, I was actually pleasantly surprised with, his development as a technician, as a route runner. Coming out of Nevada, I thought that he ran a really like stripped down route tree. But I do think that he showed more nuance in that regard. Now, he kind of reminds me a little bit of James Jones, for you guys that may remember him from those Packers teams in the early 2010s. But Doubs is a guy who got rave reviews from Aaron Rodgers. Of course, we still kind of expect Rodgers to be the quarterback in Pittsburgh next season. We'll see. But I could definitely see a reunion there making a lot of sense for both sides. In terms of weaknesses, Doubs he's a high cut player. He kind of struggles to gear down, work back to the football. He doesn't have overwhelming physical traits in terms of like speed, acceleration, agility, anything like that. And he's not really a run after catch player either. But I could definitely see the Packers being willing to move off him, even though he's a really steady player. They did select Matthew Golden in the first round. First time they've taken a first round wide receiver in a long time. And then they doubled back and took Savion Williams in the third. Doubs has primarily been an X wide receiver. Of course, that's where Metcalf is going to play now for the Steelers. But I do think like he can move around. Like he's well-rounded enough to where he can play the Z, maybe some big slot type of stuff too. For a team that is going to primarily be in like 2 wide receiver sets, I could definitely see that being intriguing for them, getting 2 big bodies on the field at the same time. And just he's entering the final year of his contract. So I think that's one of the things where like the Packers may be wanting to hang on to him just as Christian Watson kind of does recover from that serious injury that he suffered last season. But it's a really crowded depth chart. And if the Packers like want to try to make sure that they can get some for sure set in stone draft capital in return for Doubs rather than letting him hit free agency, I could definitely see, if the capital is good enough, maybe like an early day 3 pick, maybe some conditions involved in terms of playtime statistics, anything like that. I think that would at least be something that the Packers would listen to. Now, sticking with the theme of the NFC North and the Green Bay Packers, another player that I want to talk about is his teammate, Dontavian Wicks, who did some nice things as a rookie before cooling off a little bit last season for reasons that we'll kind of talk about. But Wicks is a different flavor of receiver in comparison, but an intriguing one nonetheless. The route tree is really wide open for a guy like this. His route running ability is really the calling card in his profile, the ability to change directions, getting in and out of breaks efficiently. And there's just real nuance to his movement patterns. He's a machine on outbreakers. He's a guy that can create legit separation for himself without the scheme needing to, get space for him. He can get his own bucket, and that's something I really appreciate about his game. When going back to watch his film, I was actually pleasantly surprised about a couple areas. One, just his comfortability working over the middle of the field, like deep digs, finding space versus zone coverage. And then he was just like way more impressive after the catch than I really remembered from when I scouted him coming out of Virginia. Got pretty good balance as a ball carrier. He's similarly sized as Dobbs, but he's got a quicker transition to the runner phase. 5.3 yards per reception after the catch in 2023. Those are pretty solid numbers for a guy with limited playing time. The real concern, man, is just like he just really struggles to catch the football, and I don't really know how to break it down even like more difficult or anything like that. He just has a lot of drops on film. Their focus drops, concentration, bad technique, 18% drop rate last season, 25% contested catch rate. I mean, those are pretty brutal numbers, especially for a guy who hasn't been like a full-time player. It's difficult to, say that he just was deserving of a bigger role, even in a crowded Packers receiver room when he wasn't doing like the simple things routinely. So those concerns were evident on his college film. That's a big reason why he dropped to the 5th round. He had a strong rookie season, but he wasn't able to build off that because there wasn't enough consistency in his game. So with Wicks, you get versatility and a skill set that the Steelers just don't currently have on the roster, which I think is intriguing. He's got the quick in-out wiggle to kind of be a winner at the first two levels of the field. And then, he gives you a little bit after the catch as well. The added bonus is just the alignment versatility. He's been their primary backup at all three positions. So he's played a little bit of X because he can be press coverage, even though necessarily like he doesn't have like the deep speed, somebody that's going to really necessarily get you a bunch of over the top kind of plays on deep balls, but the Steelers have plenty of speed already on offense. They really need like a route runner more than anything else, in my opinion. So 2 years of cost control, again, conditional day 3 pick, something like that. I'm definitely in for sure. If the Packers decide that, just the inconsistencies and stuff, they've had enough of that, willing to move on, get some draft capital. Recouped in that regard. But yeah, Wicks, totally understand the hands concerns, and they're definitely valid. I'm not sure if that's necessarily something that will get better, but I do think he's talented enough, and this is the type of swing on a player that I would be interested in. Next player, really tricky evaluation here, one that requires some real context, and that's Ja'Lynn Polk from the Patriots. So this is a guy who went from being an integral part of one of college football's most explosive offenses at Washington, selected early in the 2nd round, and then he went on to have one of the most disappointing rookie campaigns in recent memory. So Polk was my 50th ranked player overall on my big board last year. I really felt like he was a jack of all trades wideout that could play, inside, outside, tight splits, not necessarily X, but could play some power slot, could play some Z, some stacks, things like that. Smooth mover. I thought his ball skills were very good. He consistently attacked the ball well outside of his frame. Flashes of late hands. He could absorb hits over the middle of the field. Polk showed good play strength where he would like out-muscle smaller defenders. Awesome on in breakers versus zone coverage. He's a high effort run blocker. I didn't feel like he was like overly sudden or explosive. So I didn't see necessarily the upside that I felt like some other people did maybe with his game, just from a separation standpoint. But the real issue is like everything that I just listed on his scouting report from my notes last year in his evaluation, none of that translated to his rookie season. I mean, like the numbers are absolutely brutal. The film is brutal. I even went back and watched his targets, and it's like, it's hard to believe that I'm even watching the same player that I watched 12 months ago, to be honest with you. So now Mike Vrabel comes to town, new head coach. The Pats drafted Kyle Williams in the 3rd round, somebody that I'm really high on. They signed Steph Diggs, Matt Collins as the dirty work guy. I don't think it's crazy to think that he could be the odd man out here with a coaching staff that didn't draft him. I'm still trying to process just how things went so poorly for him, but I'm not really ready to give up on him neither, even if like New England might be. So the Steelers should absolutely call and just see like their thoughts on him. Maybe they want to get to training camp and just see like what work he's put in the offseason. There's a chance that they just may view this as like a sunk cost type of thing. He doesn't fit the system. They got a new offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. Maybe they're willing to take a day 3 pick for him. I don't know if they don't have a plan for him. But this is a type of like shrewd move that a team in transition like the Steelers should absolutely be fixated on, something that gives you legitimate upside, 3 years of cost control. So I would definitely call and see if he's available. The next guy is more of a polarizing name. I can already see like a bunch of eye rolls as like people are watching this video, I'm sure. But let's talk about another youngster that I definitely think is available, and it's Quentin Johnston, former first round pick for the Chargers. To his credit, he did take a step forward last year in his second season. He finished with over 700 yards, 8 touchdowns, some decent box score production. He had an out of body experience against the Raiders in the regular season finale. Just looked so much more confident than he ever did as a rookie. He's got very good contact balance, instant transition post catch. That's really like the two things that he does really well. The good is that he's 6'3", 210. He's got long arms, a 40-inch vertical. He had like a 90-something percentile broad jump to it at the combine. What makes him different than most of the like height, weight, speed freaks at this position is really like he's at his best with the ball in his hands. That's just really what makes him unique. His frame makes him a big target over the middle of the field. I really like the idea of him being a Z receiver that gets some layups underneath on just design touches, allows him to work with the ball, and maybe you can work him on some deep end breakers off play action. You know, the Steelers have some really good clear out guys, not only Metcalf, a guy that's going to stretch the field vertically, but Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, guys like that can stretch it vertically, get over the field on crossers and things like that. And I think that Johnston could do some similar things and help you off play action. There are flashes of him being able to stack guys vertically too, and like his speed can give corners some issues. Unfortunately, Johnston comes from like my least favorite stylistic family of receivers, and that's big guys who don't consistently play big at the catch point. It drives me insane. So despite having this really wide catch radius, and there are like highlight reel worthy clips of him like mossing defenders, showing just ridiculous hops, things like that. He's just never been consistent on jump balls. You look at the contested catch numbers; they're pitiful. Just since he's entered the league, I do think also like he's got to improve his urgency off the ball. He's got to use his hands better to keep his frame clean. He allows guys to just hang all over him, which is particularly problematic for a guy that doesn't play through contact very well in the air. He tips off his routes prematurely sometimes as well. So I don't love him as a player, to be clear, but this isn't the same general manager or coaching staff that drafted him. I just have this feeling he's going to get moved, to be honest. They drafted Trey Harris in the second round, Keandre Lambert-Smith in the fifth round. I just get the feeling that even though there were flashes last season, he had a really tough playoff game in that brutal loss for the Chargers in the first round. The lows are just really, really, really concerning. So I think the Chargers will probably be wanting to move on. He's not somebody that I would be doing backflips to get in a Steelers uniform, but at the same time, he can be a yak guy for you and potentially a plus blocker with his frame. Maybe you get some over the middle stuff too. And he's still a pretty young player. I mean, he's only a guy entering his third season. So I think it would be useful. I'm not holding out much hope that he's going to be more than that, but you know, they're desperate. The Steelers need another body to throw at the problem, and Johnston might be one of those guys that they look at. So the last guy, this is the one that I was talking about with being like just a dart throw. Not necessarily a guy that's going to move the needle, but someone that I was a little bit intrigued by last season and didn't hear much about him last year and kind of wanted to do some research on why. But it's Trey Palmer for the Bucks. He's headed into his third season in the NFL. Kind of fell off the map, but rookie season, 473 yards, 4 touchdowns. What I like is he's got like a legit track background from his high school days. 4.3 speed. He's capable of stacking guys vertically, creating separation down the field, also off crossers. I love the tempo he uses to vary throughout his routes. He can get guys lean in one direction and break the opposite direction. I thought there were some real bright spots on film of him, you know, working over the middle of the field, working back to the quarterback, getting quarterback friendly, if you will. He had a few like big time third down conversions back in 2023. One against the Texans on a game-winning drive that put them in scoring position. He's a willing blocker too. So like he's 6 foot, like 190 pounds. So he's a little bit bigger than some of the other guys that got on the roster in Austin and Wilson. But he's also returned kicks and punts. So if you're talking about a guy that's like, I don't know if he's going to make the Bucs roster or not. We'll talk about that. But, you know, if you're looking at fringe roster guys, they got to be able to contribute some on special teams, especially if they don't have like a guaranteed spot on the offense and base or 3 wide receiver sets. So he could definitely do that for you. But concerns, he's still a little bit raw as a route runner. He doesn't excel at the catch point. Like I said, he is kind of small. skinnier. He doesn't really necessarily play big at the catch point. The biggest issue, I think, was like he had some fumbles that were pretty costly during his rookie season. That was a significant issue. I think 3 fumbles, and I think he fumbled again last year. So ball security could be a thing that's held him back as well. The Bucs are a really pass-happy offense. They drafted 2 more wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka in the first round. They doubled back, got Tez Johnson later on. I would obviously prefer to get Jalen McMillan, who I actually liked a little bit more than Jalen Polk coming out. McMillan had a strong finish to his rookie campaign, but I don't think he's actually going to be available. Chris Godwin's still kind of coming back from that injury. I just think that the Bucs are probably looking at Egbuka as like best player available on the board, regardless if that's what their biggest need or not. Maybe trying to prepare for life after Mike Evans, but a late round pick swap is probably all it's going to take, because I don't even know if Palmer is going to make their roster. But maybe a guy that you could swap like a 6th and a 7th for, or something like that. It's an intriguing dart throw on a youngster that I think has at least like he's flashed a little bit. And if you could do that move right now, get him in the integrated into the system, get him over in the Berg before training camp, allow him to work with the quarterbacks over the next couple months. I think it's at least willing to do, because I would rather do stuff like this again, try to take these dart throws on younger players rather than go into the offseason or go into the regular season with the depth chart that they've got right now. And, hopefully Austin and Wilson like take those steps that we want to see from them and step into bigger roles to where it's not necessary. But my fear is that they're going to get into a similar situation. They'll be competitive near the trade deadline and feel that they absolutely have to make like kind of a desperate move, and kind of like they did last season, which is like overpay for a guy like Mike Williams, where you give up a 5th round pick for 9 games and 9 catches of a veteran that like doesn't actually give you much, and it doesn't really give you really anything in the interim, and also isn't going to really help you long term with him leaving for free agency. So Palmer, at least a little bit of an intriguing name. Again, not necessarily a needle mover, but somebody that I would at least keep an eye on, especially if he is cut come roster cut downs and things like that. But I really appreciate you guys tapping in with me. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think of these particular targets. If you guys have other questions on other options, I'm more than willing to answer those in the comments as well. I will check you guys, try to have another video up at some point throughout the week, and I will check you guys later. Peace and love.